Every camera in the room was locked on Donald Trump at the exact moment his composure cracked. 1 second, he was seated stiffly at the long polished table inside the East Room of the White House, and the next, he lurched to his feet, face flushing, voice ripping through the chatter like a blade. "Get out!" The outburst hit the room like a shockwave. But Joe Biden didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He simply stood there at the podium, hands resting easily on the sides, quiet and still in a way that made the entire room feel suddenly smaller. That calm presence, the one people had seen during heated debates and long policy nights, settled over him again. Only this time, the country was watching in real time. The East Room was packed wall to wall with senators, governors, ambassadors, and reporters whose fingers hovered over keyboards, not quite believing what they'd heard. The tension in the air felt thick enough to touch. Even the chandeliers seemed frozen. Everyone sensed that whatever was about to happen next would echo far beyond this room. Washington had seen political conflict before, plenty of it, but this night, this gathering, had a strange electricity running under it long before anything exploded. It wasn't because the event was important on paper. It was because everyone knew having Trump and Biden in the same room was a gamble. They were two men carrying not just political histories, but two competing visions of the country itself. Still, the invitation had framed the evening as a celebration of unity. A White House aide, half joking, whispered earlier that calling it Unity Night was like seating fire and gasoline at the same table and hoping for a quiet dinner. At first, the room had behaved. Conversations were light, awkward, cautious, glasses clinked, laughter fluttered here and there, thin, polite, and nervous. But beneath it, reporters' eyes darted between Trump and Biden like hawks circling. Everyone knew a moment was coming. They just didn't know when. It arrived when Joe Biden stood. Some guests began clapping. Others hesitated, glancing at Trump first. Cameras pivoted sharply. Biden adjusted the microphone and started speaking in his steady, familiar cadence. Calm, measured, deliberate. He talked about the resilience of democratic institutions, about leaders placing the country above personal ego, about unity, cooperation, and the sacred responsibility of those entrusted with power. His words floated across the room, soft but resonant. He said history would not measure the nation by the volume of its arguments, but by whether leaders listened, whether they chose courage over chaos, steadiness over spectacle, unity over division. Heads nodded, some guests softened, leaning in, others tightened their expressions, sensing where the message was directed. Trump shifted in his chair, fingers drumming hard against the table. His stare never left Biden. His aides exchanged worried glances. Biden continued, his tone still gentle but sharpening around the edges. "This nation," he said, "is bigger than any one person's pride. It's stronger than any one personality, and it will endure as long as we remember that truth." A hush fell over the room. Then Trump's chair screeched loudly against the marble as he shot to his feet. He pointed a shaking finger at Biden. "Get out!" The words echoed violently. Guests froze mid-bite. A diplomat murmured, "Did he really just say that?" A senator nearly dropped his fork. Reporters snapped upright. Cameras zoomed. Biden didn't move. He stayed exactly where he was, gazing at Trump with a calmness that contrasted so sharply with the eruption that the effect was almost surreal. He didn't reach for the mic. He didn't defend himself. He simply waited. The silence stretched, tense, breath-holding, electric. Trump's aides rushed to him, whispering frantically. Staff tried to soothe guests, now shifting uncomfortably in their seats. But the eruption was already immortalized by a dozen camera angles. Unity Night had shattered. But the story was only beginning. The room buzzed with uneasy murmurs as the shock settled into something heavier. The reporters closest to the front leaned forward, sensing a historic moment unfolding. Biden finally moved. Slowly, he leaned toward the microphone, the faint creak of the podium somehow amplifying the gravity. His voice, low, steady, composed, cut through the noise. "Mr. President," he began, eyes set firmly on Trump, "this room doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the American people." A ripple passed over the crowd, quiet, stunned, sharp. A cameraman lowered his equipment as if forgetting it was in his hands. Biden continued, calm but firm, "I was invited here, same as you, to speak about unity, and if unity makes you this uncomfortable," he paused just long enough for the silence to deepen. "Maybe it says more about where we are as a country than anything I could say tonight." Gasps, whispers. A senator mouthed, "Wow." Trump stiffened, jaw grinding. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Moments like this remind us just how far these stories travel." Trump gestured sharply at an aide to cut the microphone. But staff hesitated, unsure whether they could mute a former vice president of the United States on live television. Biden turned back to the audience. "You can ask me to leave," he said, voice steady, "but you can't erase what needs to be heard." The East Room erupted in applause, thunderous, rising, relentless. Even guests who had stayed quiet earlier found themselves clapping. Trump's aides scrambled, trying to contain the moment. Biden lifted a hand, gently quieting the room. "This isn't about me," he said, "and it isn't about you." He nodded toward Trump without breaking eye contact. "It's about every American family watching tonight. Families tired of politics treated like a grudge match. Families who want leaders focused on their safety, their health care, their future, not on shouting contests." Trump shifted, furious. His face deepened in color, but applause swelled again, bigger this time. Biden leaned in once more. "The truth, Mr. President, is that history won't remember how loudly we shouted each other down. It will remember whether we stood up when it mattered." The room held its breath. The clash was no longer just political. It had become moral, and this was only part one. Applause thundered through the East Room, rising in waves that rattled even the marble floors. Some guests stood, others clapped from their seats, and a few simply watched with stunned expressions, unsure how the night had spiraled so far from its intended script. Trump's face hardened as he scanned the room. His aides leaned in from both sides, whispering frantic strategies, but he brushed them off with a sharp flick of his hand. He inhaled as though preparing to restore control by sheer force of volume. Biden remained still. That contrast, one man vibrating with anger, the other grounded and composed, made the moment feel even sharper. Cameras zoomed in on Biden's steady expression, the kind he wore when he delivered difficult truths on the Senate floor or reassured a nation during crisis. The applause finally softened. The room seemed to fold inward, every eye fixed on the two men at the center of the storm. Trump lurched forward, gripping the table like a lifeline. "So that's it?" he yelled. "You're here to embarrass me. That's all this is." His voice cracked, then surged louder. "You think you're some kind of hero? You walk in here, on my stage, my event, and act like you know everything." The words spilled out in a furious rhythm. "You had your time, Joe, 8 years of it, and what did we get? A mess, a disaster." He jabbed a finger toward Biden. "Now you stroll back in here like you're the country's savior? Get out! I said get out!" Gasps rippled across the room. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. A foreign diplomat whispered, "This is madness," under his breath. But Biden didn't break. He didn't rise to the volume. Instead, he waited for silence, true silence, to settle before he spoke. When it came heavy. "Mr. President," Biden said softly, "the White House doesn't belong to you, and it doesn't belong to me either. It belongs to the American people. They deserve better than this display." Trump bristled. His breath hitched sharply. He turned toward the audience, arms wide as if pleading for sympathy. "You see this?" he shouted. "He's trying to humiliate me in front of all of you, on national television. It's disgraceful." A senator looked like he wanted to intervene but hesitated, sensing that this was bigger than anyone in the room. Trump slammed his hand on the table. "Security! I want him out of here!" A collective inhale swept across the crowd. Secret Service agents didn't move. They exchanged quick glances, but none stepped forward. Removing a former vice president from a White House event on live television was a line they were not prepared to cross. That immobility, that refusal, sent a tremor through the room. Trump saw it. He saw the hesitation. He saw the room was no longer his. Biden stepped slightly closer to the microphone. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone," he said gently. "I'm here because the people who invited me believe this nation deserves a conversation about unity, dignity, and leadership." His tone was calm, but the words cut with surgical precision. "And if that conversation makes you this uncomfortable, then maybe the question isn't about me. Maybe it's about why the idea of unity feels threatening." The crowd responded instantly, an eruption of applause, shouts, and rising energy that filled every corner of the East Room. Trump nearly shouted over them. "Sit down!" he roared, face flushed, voice breaking at the edges. Biden stood, steady as a stone. Guests watched, mesmerized by the contrast. One man fueled by raw emotion, the other anchored by calm authority. When the roar of applause faded, Biden spoke again. "Respect," he said, the word landing like a gavel, "isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. And right now, the American people are watching to see who understands that truth." The room fell silent, not tense, not fearful, but respectful, almost reverent. Trump clenched his jaw. "This is my presidency," he growled, "my event. I won't be lectured by you." Biden tilted his head slightly, almost sympathetic. "Your presidency, Mr. President, belongs to the people. It always has. That's the first thing every leader must understand. The words lingered like smoke. Reporters typed frantically, already predicting headlines and chyrons. Aides hovered, unsure whether to step in or stand back. It felt like history was unfolding in real time. Trump slammed the table one more time. I said get out, but the shout didn't carry the same power anymore. It felt forced, hollow, like someone trying to reclaim a room that was already slipping away. Then a voice from the back, a governor, called out clearly, "Let him speak!" Heads turned. Another voice echoed, "Let him speak!" And then another. Within seconds, half the room joined the chant. "Let him speak!" Trump froze mid-motion, his hand still raised. The chant swelled, filling the East Room with a unity completely different from the one the event had claimed to celebrate. Cameras swiveled, capturing the unprecedented reversal of momentum. Trump slammed his palm down again, but the sound was swallowed by the voices rising against him. "This is my house," he yelled. "Mine!" But his words were barely audible under the wave of defiance. The cameras caught everything. Trump trembling, the crowd united, Biden composed and steady. The chant slowly died, replaced by an expectant hush. Biden leaned toward the microphone again, the calm center of the storm. "We are standing," he said quietly, "in the people's house. Not one man's stage, not one party's theater." He paused, scanning the room. "The people deserve to be heard." Applause exploded again, this time deeper, more unified. Trump waved his arms wildly. "Fake news! They'll spin this!" he shouted. But a journalist shot back. "They don't have to spin anything, Mr. President. The cameras are live." Laughter, sharp, surprised, broke out across the room. "Before we continue, comment your thoughts below. I read every single one. Nights like this reveal more than speeches ever could." Biden watched the room settle, then spoke again, voice soft but resonant. "No one came here tonight to watch two men shout each other down. They came here because they believe this country can be more, that we can sit at the same table, even when we disagree, and find a way forward." His hand gestured lightly toward Trump. "Leadership isn't about volume. It's about vision." The room held on every word. "You can try to command a room with anger," Biden said, "or you can guide it with dignity. But only one of those choices lasts." The words reverberated. Cameras zoomed, reporters' fingers flew. Even skeptics leaned closer. Because in that moment, no matter the politics, everyone understood the gravity and everyone understood. The confrontation had shifted, and Trump was no longer in control. The applause hadn't fully faded when Trump lunged forward again, gripping the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles blanched. His breathing grew sharp, ragged, uneven. The cameras, merciless and unblinking, zoomed closer. "You think you're some kind of saint, don't you?" Trump bellowed, eyes wild, voice raw from shouting. "You come in here, into my White House, acting like you've got all the answers." The room stiffened. Trump's voice rose again, angrier, more desperate. "I'm the president, not you, not anymore. Me! You had your chance for 8 years, Joe, and what did we get? What did this country get? A mess, a disaster. Now you walk back in like some kind of savior." He pointed sharply at Biden. "Get out! I said get out!" The repetition no longer exploded. It cracked. Something in his tone sounded strained, almost pleading. The audience shifted, uncomfortable, unsure whether the line between political theater and genuine instability had just snapped. Biden remained absolutely still, not a flinch, not a tremor. His silence said more than shouting ever could. Guests looked between the two men, one unraveling, the other unshaken. A diplomat whispered, "This is history." Barely audible above the tension. Trump jabbed the air again. "This is madness," someone muttered from the crowd. Biden finally exhaled quietly, stepped closer to the microphone, and spoke. "Mr. President," he said, voice low and steady, "the White House doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the American people, and they deserve better than this." The line hit harder than any shout. Trump's expression twisted. He turned to the audience, arms thrown wide. "You see this? He's trying to humiliate me on national TV. It's an ambush, a setup." Cameras captured every flicker of panic. "Security!" Trump roared. "I said get him out, now!" But the agents didn't move. Not one. Their stillness felt louder than Trump's own voice. It was the moment everyone realized the power dynamic had shifted, for the first time that night, in a way Trump couldn't control. Biden's voice softened even more. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone," he said. "I'm here because people across this country want something better, a conversation about unity, dignity, and real leadership." He let the silence stretch before continuing. "If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe the question isn't what I'm saying. Maybe it's why the idea of unity feels like a threat." A collective gasp. Applause followed immediately, rising like a breaking wave. Trump's protests drowned beneath it. "Sit down!" Trump screamed, voice cracking. "Sit down!" But the room wasn't listening to him anymore. Biden waited until the applause dimmed, then spoke with quiet strength. "Respect isn't demanded," he said. "It's earned. And right now, Americans are watching to see who understands that." The camera caught Trump's expression shifting, anger, confusion, fear, flashing across his face in rapid succession. "This is my presidency," Trump spat out. "My event. I won't be lectured by you." Biden tilted his head slightly, almost pitying him. "Your presidency belongs to the people," he said gently. "It always has, and always will. That's leadership's first responsibility." For a moment, the room had no sound except the faint hum of the lights above. Trump slammed both palms on the table. "Get out!" But even he seemed to hear how empty the command sounded now, desperate, hollow. Then, from the back, one clear voice broke the moment. "Let him speak!" Trump whipped his head around. Another voice echoed, "Let him speak!" Then another. Soon, a growing wave of voices rose and spread through the East Room. "Let him speak! Let him speak!" In seconds, half the room had joined in. Trump's face drained of color. The chant swelled, overpowering him. His authority, the one thing he clung to most fiercely, was slipping through his fingers. He slammed his palm again, but the room barely noticed. "This is my house!" he shouted, voice almost shrill. "Mine!" But the words drowned beneath the next chorus of the chant. The cameras panned across the room, Trump trembling, the crowd united, Biden still as a mountain. When the chant faded, an almost holy silence filled the space. Biden stepped forward slightly. "We're standing," he said softly, "in the people's house. Not one man's stage, not one party's theater." He looked slowly across the room. "The people deserve to be heard." The room erupted into applause again, louder, richer, more resolute. Trump frantically waved his hands. "Fake news! They'll twist this! They'll spin this!" But he was nearly drowned out. A journalist called out from the crowd, "No one has to spin anything, Mr. President. We're live." Laughter, sharp, honest, unplanned, swept through the room. Trump staggered in place. Biden seized the moment, stepping forward with gentle confidence. "No one came here to watch two men shout each other down," he said quietly. "People came because they believe this country can be more, that we can sit down, even when we disagree, and find a way forward." He gestured lightly without anger. "Leadership isn't about how loud you can yell. It's about the vision you offer." He paused. "You can try to lead with fear, or you can lead with dignity. Only one lasts." The room absorbed the words like a truth they had been waiting to hear. Before we continue, if this part shocked you, type truth in the comments. Moments like this show the difference between shouting and leadership. The cameras caught Biden's expression, focused, steady, unwavering. And the country watching from home felt the shift. Because in that moment, the room no longer belonged to Trump. It belonged to the truth. And Biden had just spoken it. The applause rolled through the East Room again, long enough for Trump's pacing to become frantic. He moved back and forth behind the table, fists clenching and unclenching, jaw working furiously. Cameras followed every jerky step. "This is a setup," Trump finally shouted. "You're all against me, all of you." But the crowd no longer reacted the way it once did. Many simply watched, some with pity, others with disbelief. A few exchanged looks that silently asked if the president had truly lost control of the night, or something more. Biden stood at the podium, calm, collected, grounded. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move to strike back. He simply waited, allowing silence to reveal the difference between calm leadership and unraveling anger. A reporter whispered, "This isn't politics anymore. This is a turning point." The tension in the room thickened, every breath heavy. Then Biden spoke. "Anger is easy," he said softly, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "Blame is easy. Anyone can shout. But when the shouting stops, what will we have left? What will history remember?" Even though Trump froze at that, the room leaned in, caught in the gravity of the question. "Will it remember who yelled the loudest?" Biden continued, "or who tried to rise above the noise?" He didn't look at Trump for emphasis. He didn't need to. The implication hung clearly in the air. Trump's arms stiffened at his sides. For the first time all night, he didn't immediately lash out, and the silence stretched into something powerful. Cameras zoomed closer, catching every twitch in Trump's eye and every quiet breath from Biden. A reporter called out suddenly, "Mr. Biden, do you believe unity is possible under this administration?" Trump whipped his head toward the reporter, ready to snap, but Biden answered instantly. "Unity is never impossible," he said. "It's only difficult, and difficult things are exactly what leaders are supposed to fight for." The room erupted again, not the wild applause from earlier, but a deep, resonant one. Trump muttered something under his breath, but it was swallowed by the noise. For the first time, Biden didn't fill the silence immediately. He let the people speak. When the applause softened, he leaned in, his voice low and deliberate. "The presidency isn't a crown," he said. "It's a responsibility, and sometimes responsibility means hearing things you don't want to hear." Murmurs spread across the room as guests nodded, recognizing the weight of the line. Trump's fists tightened. "You're not the president anymore, Joe," he snapped, voice shaking. Biden didn't blink. "And yet," he said calmly, "here I am, because people still believe in decency, dialogue, dignity." Trump snarled, "Don't lecture me. I built this country up. You left it broken." Biden shook his head slowly. "Strength isn't measured by how hard you pound the table. It's measured by whether you lift people up or tear them down." A collective gasp swept across the audience. "And right now," Biden continued, "the nation is watching a president who confuses intimidation with leadership." Trump's mouth opened, then shut. His face flushed deeper than before. He struggled for words, for control, for anything. The cameras captured his speechlessness more brutally than any insult ever could. He pivoted suddenly, turning toward the audience. "He's disrespecting the office," he shouted. A voice from the crowd responded instantly, sharp, unwavering. "Respect has to be earned." The room reacted with a wave of murmurs. Trump stumbled, unprepared for the open challenge. Biden stepped closer to the microphone again. "I spent 8 years in this office," he said. "I know its weight, its loneliness, its sleepless nights. But you cannot lead a nation if you're ruled by your temper." He let the words sink in. "You cannot unite a country if every criticism feels like a personal attack." Silence swallowed the room. Cameras panned to Trump's clenched fists, then back to Biden's steady expression. "Leadership," Biden continued, "requires patience. It requires humility. It requires the courage to listen." A senator whispered, "This is the most honest moment we've seen in years." Trump muttered into the microphone, "You think you're perfect?" Biden shook his head. "I've made mistakes," he said plainly. "Plenty, but the measure of a leader isn't whether he makes mistakes. It's whether he learns from them." Heads nodded across the crowd. "And the measure of a nation," he continued, "isn't whether it disagrees. It's whether it can rise above its disagreements." The words hung in the air like a truth the country had forgotten. Trump abruptly shoved his chair backward, the loud scrape slicing through the silence. He stood up so quickly it sent a visible jolt through the audience. "This is over," he shouted. "I won't let him humiliate me in front of the world." Secret Service didn't move, not an inch. They stood like statues, reading the room, understanding what everyone else understood. There was no threat here, only truth. Biden leaned toward the microphone one last time for this portion, his voice soft as velvet and sharp as steel. "With all respect, Mr. President," he said, "the people watching tonight aren't judging me." He paused, long enough to let the world lean closer. "They're judging you." A gasp tore through the room. Reporters typed furiously. Guests stared wide-eyed. Some mouths hung open. Trump twitched, just slightly, but enough for cameras to catch it. Biden continued gently. "And tomorrow they won't ask, 'What did Biden say?' They'll ask, 'How did Trump react?'" The words hit harder than any shout. Trump froze. The East Room felt like it had stopped breathing. Biden lifted his glass, took a small sip of water, and looked back out at the crowd. His voice was almost a whisper. "The presidency is temporary," he said. "Character is permanent." The applause that followed wasn't loud at first. It was stunned, controlled, then rising until it shook the walls. Trump stood there, swallowed by a storm he could no longer control. And Biden, calm, composed, held the room with nothing but truth. The applause roared so loudly the chandeliers trembled. Some guests rose to their feet, others stayed seated but clapped with the force of people who understood they were witnessing something unforgettable. Journalists leaned over their laptops, typing as if the keys were racing away from them. Reporters in the back whispered updates into microphones, already feeding the story into the veins of the nation. Trump stood stiffly, fists balled, his jaw twitching as Biden's last words echoed. "The presidency is temporary. Character is permanent." He tried to speak, but the cheers swallowed him whole. For a moment, Biden didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't even look satisfied. He simply stood there, steady, composed, letting the moment speak louder than anything else could. Trump's aides huddled around him, frantic. Some tugged gently at his sleeves, urging him to sit. Others whispered desperate strategies into his ear. But Trump brushed them aside, pacing in shrinking circles like a caged storm. The East Room, usually a symbol of presidential command, felt like it had shifted its allegiance, no longer bending to the will of volume, but to the weight of dignity. Finally, Trump managed to force out a sentence. This is fake. All of it. Fake, rigged, staged. But the room wasn't buying it. Not anymore. Guests exchanged glances that lived somewhere between disbelief and exhaustion. A senator whispered, "It's over. He's lost the night." A journalist muttered, "This is going to melt every screen in America." As Biden stepped back from the podium, a sudden hush fell over the room. It was as though the audience collectively anticipated that one last line, the one history would replay for decades, and Biden delivered it with quiet precision. "Mr. President," he said, turning back toward Trump, "you can tell me to leave." He paused. "But history will remember who told the truth and who tried to silence it." The silence that followed was deafening. Trump opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His throat tightened. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Cameras zoomed in mercilessly, catching every flicker of panic and frustration on his face. Then it happened. The room erupted. Applause surged like a tidal wave, crashing against the walls, sweeping through every corner of the East Room. Senators stood, governors clapped over their heads, students shouted, journalists punched the air, disbelief etched across their faces. A few aides covering their mouths realized they had tears in their eyes. The moment had its own gravity, its own pulse, its own destiny. Trump tried desperately to shout over the crowd, "Fake! Fake! This is all fake!" But his voice was drowned beneath the thunder. Biden raised a hand, calming the room with a single gesture. "This country," he said gently, "deserves better than shouting matches, better than turning disagreements into personal wars. America isn't built on one man's ego, it's built on its people, on their hope, their courage, their belief in something greater than themselves." The words rolled through the room with the weight of a closing argument. "You don't unite a nation by silencing disagreement," Biden continued. "You unite it by listening, by leading with decency, by remembering that power is borrowed, not owned." Trump stumbled backward a step, his energy drained. His face looked tight, almost smaller under the lights. His hands trembled as he tried pointing at Biden again, but the force wasn't there, and the cameras caught it. The shift, the unraveling, the moment when the fury that had carried him for years finally collided with a wall it couldn't break. Guests whispered softly, "He's lost the crowd." "He's unraveling." Biden just reset the room. One journalist murmured into a live feed, "If the night had ended 2 minutes ago, it would have already been historic, but this is something else." Biden stepped back again, letting the applause rise and fall in waves. Every time it began to fade, someone else in the room would start clapping again, then another, until it became a rhythm, a heartbeat. Outside the East Room, the reaction spread instantly. Press rooms lit up, newsrooms scrambled, social media exploded. The clip of Trump screaming, "Get out!" and Biden calmly dismantling him spread within minutes. Inside the room, Trump stared at the cameras, wide-eyed, breathing heavily. "This is a disgrace," he said, voice cracking, but the words held no weight, no traction, no power. Biden stepped forward one final time, his expression softening, not in pity but in clarity. "Don't let anger be louder than hope," he said. "Don't let fear drown out your voice. And never let anyone convince you that decency is weakness." The crowd erupted again, louder than before. Those lines would headline every major outlet that night. Biden offered a small nod, a gesture of closure, then stepped back from the podium and folded his hands. He didn't need to raise his voice or claim victory. The moment had already spoken. Trump shook his head violently, trying to reclaim the room. "You're all against me," he shouted. "This is rigged." But hardly anyone reacted. Eyes flicked toward him briefly, then back to Biden, who remained calm, steady, unshaken. A reporter whispered, "Biden didn't just win the room, he won the narrative." And everyone knew it, because sometimes power isn't in the shouting, sometimes it's in the silence that follows. When Biden left the podium, the East Room didn't simply quiet, it shifted. The atmosphere felt different, charged, as if everyone recognized they had witnessed a moment destined to echo long after the night ended. Trump stood alone at the center, pacing in tight circles, muttering about betrayal, about the media, about setups and disrespect. His aides attempted to regroup, forming a frantic ring around him, but his agitation made it impossible to steady the moment. Meanwhile, the world outside the East Room was already erupting. Cameras from every major network fed the confrontation directly into millions of homes. News alerts flashed before guests had even left the building. CNN, Trump shouts, "Get out." Biden's calm response stuns the East Room. MSNBC. Decency versus anger. Biden dominates live confrontation. Fox News. White House drama erupts during Unity Night event. Within minutes, social media platforms exploded with clips. A student's vertical phone recording hit 1 million views before the dessert trays reached the tables. TikTok duets reenacted Biden's calm pauses and Trump's outbursts. Twitter threads dissected every line, every expression, every breath of the confrontation. One political analyst said bluntly on air, "Tonight, Biden didn't just win the moment, he defined it." At the White House, communications teams scrambled into emergency meetings. The narrative had washed over them like a tidal wave. Trump prepared a series of tweets claiming the whole event was rigged, staged, and unfair. His first tweet hit the internet seconds later. "Biden came to disrespect the presidency. Total disgrace. Fake media won't show the truth." But the comments told a different story. People weren't discussing Biden's presence. They were discussing Trump's reaction. Across the country, living rooms filled with conversations. "Did you see how calm Biden stayed? Trump completely lost it. That line about character, wow." Late-night hosts snapped into action, writers scrambled, editors pulled clips. By midnight, The Daily Show intercut Trump shouting with Biden quietly sipping water, captioning it, "Leadership speaks for itself." SNL writers joked it was the first time in years people were begging for a political speech to keep going. But beyond comedy and commentary, the nation felt something deeper. A shift, a reckoning, a moment where character, not title, claimed the spotlight. Political strategists watched the fallout closely. Republican advisors whispered concerns about temperament and optics. Democrats flooded inboxes with fundraising emails quoting Biden's line about truth. Independent voters weighed leadership through a new lens. International outlets covered the confrontation too. BBC, extraordinary White House exchange captivates the world. Al Jazeera, Biden's measured response sparks global debate on leadership. Le Monde, une leçon de calme. Le Moment, Biden-Trump fait réagir la planète. Global reactions poured in, admiration, criticism, shock, and fascination. Inside the West Wing, Trump ranted through a closed door. Staffers exchanged uneasy looks. One aide whispered, "We've lost the night completely." But Biden, he didn't stay for the cameras. He didn't hold a press conference. He simply walked out of the East Room, shook a few hands, and exited with quiet dignity. A reporter managed to catch him just outside the corridor and asked, "Mr. Biden, any final comment?" Biden paused, gave a small nod, and said, "I said what I needed to say. The rest is up to the American people." Those words became almost as powerful as the lines he delivered inside the room. By morning, every major outlet replayed the confrontation in full. Pundits broke it down frame by frame, analyzing body language and tone. Historians compared it to pivotal moments in past administrations, calling it one of the defining exchanges of the modern political era. On social platforms, one sentence swept across the country: "History will remember who told the truth and who tried to silence it." Memes, murals, t-shirts, phone cases, desktop wallpapers. Biden's line went everywhere, and the more Trump protested, the less his words resonated. The contrast between fury and composure had crystallized in a way impossible to reverse. For ordinary Americans, the moment meant more than politics. It became a conversation about character, about leadership, about what strength truly looks like. Grassroots movements launched hashtags like "Dignity First," "Lead with Decency," and "Hope Over Noise." Pastors referenced the moment in Sunday sermons. Teachers discussed it in classrooms. Families debated it over dinner. The confrontation grew larger than the event itself, larger than the two men involved, because the deeper truth was undeniable. Sometimes the loudest voice loses, sometimes the calmest one leads, and in the quiet after the storm, people reflected on that difference. What does leadership mean? What does dignity look like? What should the country expect from those in power? The answers for many changed that night, and as dawn broke across the country, one sentiment echoed across social media, newsrooms, living rooms, and hearts. Joe Biden didn't shout, he led. Thank you so much for watching this story unfold. Moments like these remind us how powerful truth, calm, and character can be, especially in the face of chaos. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think about what real leadership should look like, please take a moment to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Your voice matters, and your engagement helps stories like this reach even more people searching for clarity in complicated times. We appreciate you deeply. Stay safe, stay hopeful, and stay connected.